When I was here, there was this building, and that was about it. All that awesomeness down there didn't even exist. So it does, in some ways, feel like ages ago. But then I see guys like Doc and Mr. Schmidt who look exactly the same. It's sort of like a time capsule. It's pretty cool. But this is an amazing place. Before I get started, I was talking to Mr. Schmidt. He actually was one of the catalysts that got me to where I am in the video game industry today. Because he was very forward-thinking. We were doing things, creating game experiences, and I don't remember the exact name of the class, but I created actually my first game prototype under Mr. Schmidt. It was a little one-on-one fighter, little stick figures, and I remember one of them had a fireball. They were going down a raft. I had moon art in the background. It was like a 2D black and white thing, and it was super cool. We also had a task where you gave us a book, and you said if this was pitched to a movie distributor, how would you market it? Through a movie poster. And it's tasks like that I think are so amazing that you guys can do here, if you're interested in this sort of stuff, that are really special. So I'm very excited to be back. I hope to talk for maybe 10, 15 minutes, but I really want this to be conversational. It's also very exciting for me to be here and hear from you guys if you're interested in video games. I'm assuming if you're here, you're either interested in video games. Do you like video games? Raise your hand if you like video games. All right, who thinks they might want to make video games? Keep your hands up. Okay. And who's just here because they have free period? All right, good. So everyone has some interest in being here. That is awesome. So I'm going to talk for about 10 to 15 minutes about my story, how I got into the game industry. And please think of questions as I'm talking, because I hope we can talk a little bit afterwards. So video games, you may love them. Can you guys see, by the way? But do you want to make them? That is the question. It's a very, very different thing. I love video games since I was very young. On the Commodore 64, probably 5 or 6 years old. You guys have no clue what that is, I guess, now that I'm talking out loud. But it's the equivalent of your, I guess, of your, not even the Nintendo 64. What did you guys grow up with?
PlayStation 1.
PlayStation 1, okay, all right. Okay, very cool.
Super Nintendo.
So that was sort of my first love. I've always loved games. But it's a very different thing, making them is fun, but it's also very highly complex work, very multidisciplined, a ton of different personalities, and a ton of different people coming together to make something that has a lot of different elements to it. I'm going to talk about that when I get into Firaxis. But that's what I want you guys thinking about. Before we get started, I work at Firaxis Games. Sid Meier created Civilization. Do you know another game he designed? XCOM. He did not design XCOM, but we made XCOM there, so you're kind of right.
Alpha Centauri.
Alpha Centauri, that's right. Good. Very nice. We have fellow enthusiasts here. All right. This is the squad. This is the genre of game that I work on. Do you know two? It's a tricky question, so I want to see if anyone here is a diehard like me. 2 squad-based tactical games. That's good. That's tactical and squad. Well, yes. I'm going to give you a correct on that. Anyone else?
Warhammer.
Okay. Good. Very good.
StarCraft.
Say that again.
StarCraft.
Yeah, StarCraft's it's a real-time strategy, but yeah, it's good. They're all under that strategy umbrella. You have?
Oh, mine's not really strategy, but you have to win a squad.
Yes, that is true. Absolutely. God of War 2 is Dawn of War. Yeah, absolutely. They say God of War. God of War, Gears of War, Dawn of War. And there is a correct answer here. What's the king of survival horror games? What's that? Incorrect. A game.
Eternal Darkness?
Nope. Nope, okay. There is no correct answer. I'm just kidding. Personally, I love Silent. What's that? Yeah, the second one. That's correct. Good. Okay, so a little bit about myself. Let me get this out of the way. So every game needs a strong interest curve. An interest curve, I don't know if you guys know what an interest curve is. Very basically, you can apply this to anything in entertainment. It's not just games. It can be books, movies. It can be an interactive experience, walking through a museum. You don't just want to have the consumer of the goods sort of have this flat experience, nor do you want them to be too high at all times or too low. You sort of want them to have these spikes of interest as they go through an experience. So if it's something like God of War, there are moments of traversal that are a little more mellow, low-key, but then there are these huge boss battles that are these high spikes of interest. That when you design an experience and design a game, you actually think about everything very holistically and from a high level to ensure that the user is staying engaged at a maximum level. So I have an interest curve of my life. This is approximately GCS. It was very high, liked it a lot. This is college. You guys will have very high interest curve in college. College is great. And then this is post-college for me. I went to college for, it was sort of my personal valley of despair. I went to college, I got my degree in business management and marketing. It was a solid degree. It was something I was confident in, but I wasn't exactly 100% sure what I wanted to do with that degree. So I became a banker after undergrad. I worked for Bank of America. I was a manager for a bank there. I moved up and became a vice president of the bank. I managed client portfolios. Did a lot of very white-collar, black and white things that are interesting to a lot of people, but it wasn't personally fulfilling me. And I wanted to do something that was a little bit more creative, a little bit less wearing a suit and tie to work every day. So, as I was working in the bank for about 5 years, I had a pretty pivotal moment when I read a book called A Whole New Mind. You guys have not read that book. Has anyone here read it? You read it? Awesome. You read it as a fact? Yeah. Well, you did, Mr. Schmidt. Everyone else failed their homework.
I never reads anything.
It's a really important book in my mind. This was sort of, the way that I can sum it up, you know, if you tell your parents you want to make video games, it can kind of be, you know, shunned to the side. This book, from a business perspective, said there's a future in America's workforce for things like video games, like creative thinking, that in fact might be the best way to go because we're entering the new conceptual age. We're exiting, you know, the agricultural age, we're exiting the informational age. We are moving away from things and looking for unique thinkers, right-brain thinkers, things that can't be automated overseas, things that can't be duplicated. And creativity is sort of the argument in A Whole New Mind. That's where we can differentiate ourselves as a workforce, as a country. The game isn't about video games. They talk about video games. It's actually where I learned about Carnegie Mellon's Entertainment Technology Center and decided to go there. But the point of it was that it made me realize, you know, video games aren't just made by elves in the North Pole. There's an actual business there that require a unique type of thinker to pull it off and bring it all together. So after reading that book, as Mr. Schmidt mentioned, I read about the Entertainment Technology Center in that book. There was actually a paragraph on that. And they said, look, there are places cropping up around the world. It's a postgraduate degree. And what the Entertainment Technology Center is they bring people together that may have an interest in tech, engineering, and then also the other side of the coin, art, people that like modeling, painting. You may like writing. You may like composing music. All these different disciplines, they bring them together. Or someone like me that's not an expert in any, knows a little bit about everything, bring them together and say, look, you guys work together and make an artifact. Make something very, very cool. There's not a lot of classes at the Entertainment Technology Center. What you're doing is you're building a deliverable. You're building something that can be shipped, that can be marketed, that somebody can use. And I said, this sounds awesome for me. I actually applied there and I somehow got in. I actually used some of my art from Glen Oak Country School because I did always love drawing and sketching. So that was part of my portfolio that I submitted to the Entertainment Technology Center, along with a presentation about how I differentiated myself. And that's how you want to think about what interests you. And in my case, again, I wasn't an expert in art, I wasn't an expert in code, but I felt I had the business acumen merged with creativity that could work with these people to bring everything together from a higher level. So at the ETC, remember, I was in banking for a long time. So I had to learn a lot quick. I didn't know what Perforce was. I didn't know what all the software development kits were. I didn't know what the 3D modeling programs were. So I learned a lot very quickly in my first semester by actually doing small tasks in each of those programs. And then after that, I met some people there that I connected with, 2 engineers, 2 artists, myself, and we made a video game. Some things that I learned from, before I get into that, from building virtual worlds, prototype, prototype, that means, again, make things. So everyone in this room, I bet you guys have an awesome idea for a video game. or you think about it a lot, like, this could be really cool if this game did this, or I have the best game idea in the world. That's very easy. What you need to do is apply some of your skills to actually make something, because that's the hard part. And at the ETC, you make stuff. You make a lot of stuff. So you actually work with, in 2-week increments with other people to make these short mini games, and then you present them and deliver them. They have to be playable. They have to be as bug-free as possible. So it really is baptism by fire. Again, learn your craft, excel in your craft, choose something, and become an expert in it, because then you really add value to the team and allow everything to come together. And this is actually a very soft skill that is critical. You have to learn to be a good teammate. You have to play nice with others. Video games in particular, they're very multidisciplinary. There's no more, one-man shops making video games, unless, I know you guys might say Notch, like Minecraft started that, but he actually has a pretty big team behind him before he left the Minecraft studio. But video games in general are very large productions, and I got a lot of feedback from professionals in the industry that they would much rather hire a good, solid worker that's easy to work with than someone who has rock star technical skills, but they're a jerk. They don't want to hire those people because that really disrupts sort of the soft element of the project and bringing it all together. So you want to be easy to work with. Again, talked about building virtual worlds. These are just some of the different devices we worked with. The item on the right is called the Jamma Drum. It's actually a multi-touch device with an overhead projection, so you're playing multiplayer games and touching things as things are moving around. Okay, so this is after that first semester of Baptism by Fire. This is what I worked on. It's called Winds of Orbis. I got together with those students that I mentioned to you, and we pitched a video game to the faculty. And it's a pretty intensive process. Only a small amount go through. So we were very lucky to have this opportunity. My role on the team was a co-designer, and I composed the music, and I ran the production of the game. So we sort of crafted this prototype that then we moved to a point where we brought it to the Independent Games Festival. I don't know if you guys have heard of IGF, but it is sort of like the Sundance Film Festival of video games. And we got accepted there. We were very lucky. It was a big moment for us. Before I moved on, so this is, you guys might be too young for some of this, but it's really cool to me. It'll be cool to Mr. Schmidt. This is Michael Keaton, the original Batman, playing our prototype. This is Cliff Blazinski, the lead designer of Gears of War. And this is Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker, playing our prototype. And C-3PO, outside of his robotic gear, also playing our prototype. So this is just a little perk of the ETC. We had some celebrities that were very interested in this stuff. They would sometimes come through, and we would present to them, and they would play it. You can see the sort of reformatted dance pad down here. What we did was we took a Dance Dance Revolution dance pad with Orbis. And this was just as the Wii was coming out. This was before the travesty that was Kinect and all that stuff. Where we said we want to create an action-adventure game, but get kids off the couch, not just sit with a controller on the couch. So we combined a sort of active nature of they need to jump around on the dance pad if you want your hero on screen to jump. If you want to swing your sword, you have to step and move your arm with the Wii remote. So we sort of tried to create this full body interface for the character on screen. I do have a movie. I don't know if you guys want to see it. Should I show that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just give you a sense of the scope of. was 2008, 2007. So we tried to just jam-pack a ton of mechanics. That goes back to the prototype. Right, so that was a team, just to give you guys a sense of scope before I talk about Firaxis. Myself, 2 programmers, 2 artists. So 5 guys worked on that over the course of 2 semesters. And we just focused on, let's get as many mechanics as we can, try to wrap it in a world, and then we got it onto IGF, which was a big moment for us. Okay, so after my last semester at the ETC, I interviewed with a few companies, and Firaxis, I actually really wanted to be on the East Coast. That's where my family is. That's where my wife and I wanted to establish our roots, and Firaxis Games was there. I was always a big fan of strategy games, so I had the opportunity to interview with them, and I got an internship at Firaxis. If you guys aren't familiar, Sid Meier, he's one of the most well-known game designers ever. He created Civilization. Civilization 5 is our latest version. There's a lot of expansions that go along with that. We just released a game called Civilization Beyond Earth, which is sort of the spiritual successor to Alpha Centauri. And I worked on XCOM, which was our other big title that came out a few years ago. I started at Firaxis, again, as an intern. That was in January 2009. I have a picture of a sponge there because my role, not everyone does this, but advice to you guys, if you ever have these opportunities, be a sponge. Just listen, take everything in, learn the culture, learn how the team works. I rarely talked, and that actually worked a lot to my benefit when I did have opportunities later to step up in a leadership role, because I wanted to understand the dynamics of the team and how things were done. So as an associate producer at that time, I was supporting the production team. It was a lot of note-taking, it was a lot of documentation, going to meetings, things like that. I was hired as a full-time associate producer, and at the same time I started teaching myself some level design skills, because I had ambitions beyond. Chip Hausch was a professor at Carnegie Mellon. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of the last lecture, but I highly recommend it actually to show to your students. It's the best thing on the internet. There's a lot of crap on the internet, vitriol on the internet. This is an hour of a man speaking that knows he's going to die. He's diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he still helped start the ETC. And he just talks about a lot of these lessons that I'm alluding to you guys. It was an amazing speech. I got to see it in person. And this was one of his quotes. The brick walls are not there to keep us out. The brick walls are there to give us a chance to show how badly we want something. And this was an example of that, where I was sort of doing the production role well. I was supporting the production team. But again, I wanted to get into Unreal, which was the engine we were working in, and I taught myself some level design. So on the side, I was doing level layouts, I was taking art from artists, putting them together, making maps for XCOM, and I actually taught myself some light scripting tools with engineering support to prototype some variations to game mechanics. That initiative led me to become lead producer of XCOM Enemy Unknown in May 2010. Which it was a very strange career path. Some things happened. I was then given the opportunity to sort of lead the production from level design and associate producer. Through October 2012, I helped bring it home with the other leadership on the project, and we launched XCOM in October 2012. So, just to show you guys a little bit of a scope difference, and before we get into the disciplines. XCOM internally was a 60-person team as opposed to the 6 for Orbis. And we also had maybe 20 to 30 people externally all around the world contributing. This is the trailer for XCOM. Has anyone here, have you guys heard of XCOM?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So that's a little bit different than Orbis, as you guys can see. XCOM is a strategy game. Overhead, three-quarter perspective, squad-based, turn-based, very much in the tradition of classic tactical games. There actually was an original XCOM released in 1994, and we're sort of rebooting it. Came out in October 2012, and I'm so proud of the team. It was a big success critically. We got an 89 and 90 Metacritic rating. If you guys follow that, that's very tough to do. So please play it if you haven't. I would encourage you guys to check it out. It's not just it's not just guns and killing. Like, you have to think. There's turn-based movements, and there's definitely. So I'm currently a senior producer on an unannounced project. I've been doing that since the expansion was complete for XCOM, which was called Enemy Within. And I'm still learning. I'm always learning. Mr. Schmidt and I were talking before this. It's a breakneck industry. Stuff is always changing. Not just tech, although that is sort of the thing that changes the most, but even my production processes are changing. How you run a team, the minutia and the nuts and bolts of how to run a team. I'm always learning. So I guess before we talk, I did want to run through quickly. I think you guys are pretty educated on game genres, and this slide is a little old now. I tried to compartmentalize for students maybe that weren't as much gamers, sort of the spectrum of games that you can get into from AAA to mobile and social. There's so much crossover now that this is almost breaking down. When you look at things like Destiny, a persistent online shooter that is massive, multiplayer online battle arenas like League of Legends, they're social, they're also pretty hardcore. Things like Minecraft, it's an indie game, but it's also social. So things are really breaking down. This is traditional AAA, very high production, quality graphics, cinematics, voiceover, the cutting edge technology. This is a shot from Tomb Raider, a shot from Elder Scrolls, Skyrim. Huge worlds, vast open worlds. This is one that is on my next to play list, Shadow of Mordor. Heard it's very good. Then you have the casual games. I mean, these things are games too. Don't look down upon them. Solitaire and Bejeweled. Indie games, Limbo is one of my favorites. These are smaller. These are generally done by much smaller teams. AAA games have 100+ person teams. These can be done from anywhere to 10 to 20 people generally. They have a lighter art cost, but generally independent games have very cool art styles, and that's how they make up for the lack of traditional 3D. World of Goo was a game done by ETC students after they graduated. Very successful game. And Minecraft. Social games, the Facebook stuff, that's the iOS stuff like Clash of Clans. This is a social game, but it's also very much rooted in traditional games. This is League of Legends. Then you have mobile style games like Angry Birds, and my wife who loves Scrabble. She'll play that with me. And then this is an example of AAA mobile crossover. This is Infinity Blade, where they have very high quality graphics, but it's on the scale of mobile. So before we start talking, I just wanted to reiterate that probably one of the coolest things about the game industry is that there truly is a role for everyone. It's not just an engineer and an artist and a designer. If you, really almost anyone in this room, could work in game development if you were passionate enough. So we're going to go through some of these. Design, that sort of is the tip of games. Everyone wants to be a designer, right? And then there's different sub-disciplines. Game design, level design, which is what I did on XCOM. More systemic design, where you're in spreadsheets a lot, balancing and tuning. Sometimes there's multiplayer-specific design, things like MOBAs. On the art end, concept artists, so if you love illustrations. Then you have 3D modelers that also do texturing of materials, animators that put the soul into the 3D models. Effects are very important, particle effects, things like that. And then the user interface of the game, which is often goes forgotten, but it's very important. How to convey the mechanics to the player on screen in a visually interesting way. Engineering, if you like writing code, this is the sort of stuff that you're getting your feet wet with Mr. Schmidt. Lots of different sub-disciplines on the engineering end as well, related to gameplay. If you create systems and tools for the rest of the team to be able to do their job, artificial intelligence is bringing the opposition of a game to life and making them interesting. Graphical engineers that support artists, because there's so much tech behind the art. It's not just dropping things in. You need someone that is a coder to provide the support to make it look as good as possible from a lighting perspective, effects, all that sort of stuff. And then there's also user interface engineers. So if you're into audio, writing music, sound effects and sound design are huge in games. A game like Dead Space, in my opinion, the sound design is really what differentiated that product. Walking down the creepy halls and hearing the sounds added so much to the project. But again, it's such an unseen thing, but it's so important. If you like writing, narrative designers, script writers, people that write the stories of games, and then my role right now. And to reiterate, all of the stuff that I just talked about previously, traditionally, an artist can work in a silo. You can paint in a silo. You can draw in a silo. A musician can compose in a silo. Producers are very important because they bring it all together. These are people with very different personalities, sometimes different agendas, and you need to make sure that they all work cohesive as a team to bring the production together. I'm also the keeper of the time, the budget as well. So I need to keep track of, are we going over cost? If we are, how do we change course? Because ultimately this is a business. So again, going back to my experience in the banking industry, I think helped here sort of blend the creative and the business end. And then marketers. So even if marketers aren't day to day on the development of the team, but they come in the end and they say, all right, how do you guys want to sell this thing? Or here are some ideas for how to sell it. That trailer I showed you, that was a heavy collaboration with marketing. We didn't create that internally. We gave them the assets individually, and then they said, here's how we're going to put it all together and make it as palatable as possible to people that might want to buy your game. So, I think it's pretty clear that I love game development. I learned to love it. When I went to the ETC, I actually had some friends and other people there that went there, and they found, you know what? The work isn't for me. I love games, but I don't like making them. It's very challenging work, and you have to like rolling up your sleeves and digging into the nuts and bolts. So it's not for everyone. So video games, you may love them, but do you want to make them? That is the question. Questions? Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to hear questions. Yeah. Yes.
How much crossover is there between the writer and the designer? Like, how much crossover is there for these sectors?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends on the studio and the publisher, and I wish I could give you it's this way or that way, but it really depends on what studio you're at. The studio that I'm at, the lead designer or the creative director, they basically set the vision, and then they work with the writer to figure out the minutia of it. So you have a writer specifically saying, okay, the lead designer saying we need these X amount of cinematics to support what happens over the course of the game. I'm now going to break down and write those scripts, submit them to design and production, they'll review them, go through a feedback loop. So very much like a lot of things in game development is a collaborative process. In our case, we have a dedicated writer, but he answers to the creative director. Yep.
You mentioned how they have a creative director. Like, what sort of, is it like a panel of people, or is it like a specific person who comes up with the idea and then pushes the project?
Yeah, the way Firaxis does it, that's the house that Sid Meier built, and so Sid, all the other projects in that mold, Sid is actually an engineer designer, which is very unique for the rest of the industry. Generally, engineers, they can have design input and code, but they're not also the final product owner that says creatively this is what happens. So that's how we run it at Firaxis, where we have a creative director, one person, who creates the vision of the game. He works with then the other leads, myself, the technical lead, and the art lead, to support that vision, and we collaborate on it. But he's ultimately the final say. Now, when we get to a certain point of production, that transition of final say goes from creative direction to production, because you have to finish a game. It'll just go on forever and ever as you're making changes. But in pre-production and for most of production, the creative director is one person that sort of says, this is what needs to happen. But a great creative director isn't sitting in their ivory tower and just mandating. truly games are a collaboration of ideas from everyone on the team, and the creative director is excellent at filtering. I'm in meetings with Sid Meier, sometimes just general design meetings. He doesn't say a word. He just listens to people. And then he goes out and he makes the decisions with what he wants based on listening and filtering. So, if that answers your question. Any other questions? Come on. Yes?
You mentioned you're a level designer for the XCOM.
I'm sorry, say that again?
You're a level designer, right?
Yes, I was.
So how can you design the levels to attract more people to play your game?
Yeah, that's the question, and that's constantly the root of conversations that happens in your pit. I was in a pit with 3 other level designers. That's sort of the high level question, and then you break that down into so many sub questions where it's like, okay, how can we make this as attractive to the player as possible? Okay, well, our game is a cover-based game. We need to understand how far the units can move individually and make sure that there is plenty of cover options, both high and low cover, within that move radius. That needs to be taken into account within every section. I know I'm getting very granular right now, but that's sort of an example of the types of conversations that all then filter up to, as we collaborate on what makes the best experience, the player will have a better time with it. Some processes that we do, internal play tests, that really helps you get there as well, because it's such a nebulous thing, that question of like, well, what's the best thing for the player? Well, you have to talk about it a lot, and you have to get to the root of the problem through playing. And that's why it's so important to have things playable, and then you get feedback from teammates, from quality assurance, from external people that say, okay, this is where you currently have the levels, well, this didn't work for me, that didn't work for me. And as you start hearing trends from play testers, you address it across all of the maps and make the best maps possible.
What was some of the thought process that went into turning old XCOM, which is very, very different from enemy unknown, into the finished enemy unknown project?
Yeah, that was interesting because so our lead designer initially, he's a huge original XCOM fan, and he was like, we're just going to make the original XCOM. That was the perfect game. We're going to make it with updated graphics. That's it. But it's interesting. A lot of modern sensibilities have changed over 15 years with respect to game design and visuals and cinematics. So our game definitely had to evolve in certain areas that the fans didn't like hearing on paper, but then when they